The first time my ex-boyfriend's name lit up my phone, I froze. My husband was away on a work trip, and the house felt too quiet. The message was simple: thinking about you. It was like a match dropped into a pile of dry leaves. I knew I shouldn't reply. I knew opening that door would lead to nothing but chaos. But the curiosity, the lingering feelings I hadn't addressed, were too much to ignore. My fingers hovered over the screen before I typed back, "Why now?" "I can't stop thinking about you," he replied almost instantly. My heart raced, a mix of excitement and dread. Memories of us flooded my mind, the good, the bad, the electric tension that had always existed between us. I stared at the screen, torn between my current life and the pull of the past. I told myself it was harmless. A little conversation couldn't hurt. But the messages became more frequent, more personal. Late at night, when the house was dark and still, I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone else. We talked about everything: our regrets, our dreams, the what-ifs we never dared to say out loud before. One night, he asked me to meet him. "Just for coffee," he said. "No pressure." My logical mind screamed no, but my heart, my restless heart, said yes. When I walked into the cafe, he was already there, sitting in the corner with a coffee in front of him. His eyes lit up when he saw me, and for a moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as it had when we were together. But there was something else, something unspoken that lingered between us. When we said goodbye, he hugged me, and I felt it, the pull, the spark that had never really gone away. It scared me, but it also exhilarated me. I went home that night, my mind racing with thoughts of him. My husband called to check in, and I felt a pang of guilt so sharp it took my breath away. But it didn't stop there. The texts continued, more intense now, more suggestive. He knew exactly what to say to disarm me, to make me question everything. And I let him. I let him worm his way back into my life, into my mind. Then one evening, he called. "I'm outside," he said. My heart nearly stopped. I opened the door to find him standing there, his eyes filled with an intensity that made my knees weak. "I couldn't stay away," he said. I should have sent him away. I should have slammed the door and called my husband. But instead, I stepped aside and let him in. The tension between us was unbearable. He stood too close, his eyes locked on mine, and before I knew it, his lips were on mine. It was like a dam had broken, years of pent-up emotion and desire spilling over in a rush. "This is wrong," I whispered, even as I pulled him closer. "Then why does it feel so right?" He replied, his voice low and filled with desperation. And in that moment, I couldn't argue. I didn't want to. The hours that followed were a blur of emotion and sensation. He made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years, but the guilt was like a shadow, always lurking, always reminding me of the life I was risking. Afterward, as we lay tangled together, reality began to creep back in. "What are we doing?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Living," he said simply. But I wasn't sure if that was true. It felt more like destroying. In the days that followed, I was a mess. Every time my husband called, I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of my secret. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to end things with my ex. He was like a drug, and I was completely addicted. "We have to stop," I told him one night when he called. "Do you want to stop?" he asked, his voice soft but insistent. I hesitated. "No." "Then don't," he said. And just like that, I was pulled back in. But secrets have a way of unraveling, and ours was no exception. My husband came home early from a trip and found a text on my phone. A text I hadn't meant to leave open. The confrontation was brutal. He demanded to know the truth, and I couldn't lie anymore. I told him everything. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He just looked at me, his face a mask of pain and disbelief. Why? He asked, his voice breaking. I didn't have an answer. How could I explain something I didn't fully understand myself? The fallout was devastating. My husband left, taking with him the life we'd built together. And my ex? He disappeared too, unable to handle the reality of what we'd done. Now I'm alone, left to pick up the pieces of a life I've shattered. I thought I could have it all, the thrill of the past and the stability of the present. But I was wrong. You can't build a future on a foundation of lies. And as I sit here, replaying everything in my mind, I'm haunted by one question: was it worth it?